I accidentally stopped recording. Okay, so I was just talking about how I would find it hard to believe that the current president isn't a prick because of the culture he would have been raised in his very upper class family. So, I mean, thank goodness he's being beneficial to the country. But anyway, he's very much taking on this persona of I'm willing to fight dirty. I care about my country more than I care about whatever. Um, So there's this tit for tat going with Mexico because Mexico's government seems to be much more like um, happy to maintain the status quo and kind of see this new president as being immature and disruptive and kind of a thug rather than a real leader. And Mexico has been really snide toward him and toward Ecuador and the things that are happening. So there's kind of this. Oh, and another thing about this whole like kind of heavy medieval influence into the culture, which is still playing out, like the whole Latin lover thing comes from that. But part of that is like when you're insulted, they've insulted your honor. Like you fight duels over that. So it is a big deal that Mexico has been willing to say disrespectful things. And in the midst of all of this, one of the bad guys they caught last fall, they had his phone that showed that there were agreements between him and a bunch of government officials, including judges and whatnot, and they ended up tracing it out to between 1 and 200 government officials who they outed as being corrupt and in bed with the organized crime. And mind you, at this time, there's also political assassinations happening. Like I can't completely condemn those individuals because it was very much a case of, hey, come work with us and get some of the cut, or we're going to kill you and your family. So, have your pick. But these 1 to 200 government officials, had a lot of very suspicious, like, rulings that seemed not nearly harsh enough against people who have been caught for organized crime work. Another person who was kind of in that whole mix was the vice president under Correa. So Correa managed to get out of the country. The vice president did not. And it has been convicted on multiple crimes of corruption for, again, just economically raping the country, and had been let out of prison by a couple of judges a couple of times. But it turns out those were judges who were all on that organized crime payroll. And so when those judges got taken down, the original sentence got reestablished. This guy needed to go back to prison. But of course, he doesn't want to go back to prison, so he goes to the Mexico embassy to seek asylum. And this is happening at the time when Mexico's being really a jerk to Ecuador. So there's this tit for tat. It's escalating, and it finally hit like a total breaking point last week when Mexico's ambassador here implied that the last election was not valid, like the last Ecuadorian election should not be considered valid. And so then that person, the ambassador, was declared a persona non grata, which means they're getting kicked out of the country. You're not allowed to be here. And in retaliation to that, the ambassador granted asylum to this vice president who should be in jail. And in retaliation for that, Ecuador did something that was absolutely not okay at all. They stormed the embassy to arrest this guy. And I'm hoping that the Ecuadorian president learns from it. Like, he has had incredible success and done incredibly good things by being a thug to thugs. But what he needs to realize is that in the international community, the thug thing is not going to work. Like, you have to be civilized to the civilized, and you have to play their games. So Mexico is, as of right now, absolutely not apologizing. Ecuador is absolutely not apologizing. Mexico and Ecuador have broken diplomatic ties. It's really pretty unprecedented, and basically every world leader who matters has come out condemning Ecuador's president for doing that because the Vienna Convention matters. And but none of the Ecuadorians really mind because Mexico was being a jerk. And I don't think there's any sign that it'll have any impact on trade either. So anyway, what do I say? The coast is where most of the crime has been, even though it's like now a tenth of what it used to be, maybe even less. Basically no crime up in the Andes. I should say no violent crime up in the Andes. There are definitely thefts, like petty thefts. But you're really only going to get robbed if you make it really easy to be robbed. So as long as you have like that theft-proof backpack and don't walk around pulling big wads of bills out of your pocket and don't wear fancy jewelry, as long as you don't make yourself like act like you're asking to get robbed, you're going to be perfectly fine. I feel far, 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 far more safe where we are in Ecuador and all the places we'll be traveling than I do in St. Paul, where my condo was before, where there were lots of utterly insane, violent, homeless people. And I should say addicts, like it's not the fact they're homeless, it's the fact that they were like really hardcore drug addicts who couldn't function, that made them scary to be around. So again, there's basically, at this point, far less violent crime in any part of Ecuador than you encounter anywhere in the new normal for the United States. Yeah, there you go.